Hello, everybody, and Happy New Year to you all. Welcome to the 50th episode of Crime Over Wine, the only podcast with head-scratching true crime stories that are just better over a bottle of wine. I'm your host, Liam Collins, and for my 50th episode, I, of course, had to have a very special guest co-host this week. This podcast literally would not be possible without her because I would actually not be alive. My guest co-host this week is my mom. Hello, Mom. How are you?
Hi, Liam. I'm great, and I'm so excited to be on with you.
I'm so excited that you're here, and y'all are in for a special treat because my mom is really the person who really truly inspired my interest in true crime and my love for wine too. Growing up, that was the thing, and the ID channel was always on, and so that was really kind of what got me into it. But honestly, Mom, you give me a little bit of a run for my money in terms of the true crime lover, for sure. And she has been a huge supporter of the podcast as well. So I thank you so much for that, Mom. And so I had to have you on, of course, in honor of my major milestone episode this week. So thanks so much for doing this.
Well, you're so welcome. I only had to wait for 49 episodes to get
my
invite.
Well, I had to get a really good, number on for you, right? Who wants to be episode 36? Obviously it has to be episode 50. So here we are. So let's celebrate that with a glass of wine as we normally do, Mom.
Absolutely.
All right, excellent. So this week we are drinking Murphy Goode's Cabernet Sauvignon. It smells and tastes like black cherry with just a hint of black licorice. It has notes of cassis, thyme, chocolate, and vanilla with just a wee bit of toast along the finish. It is the perfect wine for grilling and chilling. So that sounds fun. So let's do that, Mom. Let's do it.
Oh, it sure does sound fun.
Have you ever had Murphy before? Murphy Good?
I never had.
I had it. So I actually discovered Murphy Good, ironically enough, not to bring up the P word, but during the pandemic. And so I actually have, I don't think I've had this exact one before, because I feel like the last time I had Murphy Good, it had a cork and it has a different label to it, unless they redesigned it and stuff. But I do know that it's very, very dark. It's a thick one for sure. So this is going to be
dark.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. It's purple, basically. It's a purple wine. So cheers to you, Mom. Thanks so much for coming on.
Cheers to you.
Ooh, okay. I do get a little bit of black licorice in there.
I do too, but I love black licorice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a total black licorice taste, but just a little hint of it in there.
Yeah, I don't mind it. It's definitely, it's a little bit in the back of the mouth, right? That's mostly where I'm getting it. It's not a whole lot in the front. In the front, I'm getting a lot of those black cherries, a lot of those chocolate, vanilla, those kind of flavors too as well.
Yeah, I haven't. Oh wait, I was just about to say I haven't tasted the chocolate yet, and then as I swallowed, I did.
Right. See, I always notice too, whenever you really focus in on those flavors, that's when it really pops out a lot more. So
yeah. This is nice, though. I like this.
Yeah, I like it. It's a winter wine for sure, right? Because it's dark. It's it very much so gives, by the fire on a cold winter night, that kind of thing. I could definitely see that for that kind of energy we're going for here. And yeah, I mean, listen, I got my love for bold, dark wines from you. And so I very much so get that here. But it's fruitier than you would typically kind of expect those kind of wines as well. So because it's not very dry.
So no, it's definitely fruity. And I think now what I'm starting to sense is that the licorice is more in the smell. I'm not even sure that I'm tasting it as much as I'm smelling it a little bit.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then
tasting the berries.
Yeah, no, you're right about that.
But it's nice. That's a nice wine.
Yeah, I think I like it as well. And it's definitely again, I remember Murphy Good being a very dark wine. This is a little bit lighter than what I remember. A little bit lighter. So, but maybe it's just been a while and my palate has progressed. So maybe I'll blame it on that. But Mom, we have 19 pages of a story to get through this week. And so I want to get into that because I know that you know this case and I want to hear everything you have to say about it. Hopefully you don't know every detail, though.
Absolutely. I can't wait.
Well, I am going to tell you a story that you actually told me about for the very first time. You've been trying to get me to cover this case for weeks, months, a year. And so we're doing it this week, Mom. I've been saving it just for you in every single creepy and frustrating detail as well. This week, I want to tell you about Mary Kellerman and the Tylenol killings. On September 28th, 1982, the Kellerman family was starting to deal with something every family has at one point, a sick kid. 12-year-old Mary Kellerman was starting to come down with what the whole family believed to be just a really bad cold. Mary was a really good kid, an only child in her parents' whole world. She loved making pottery and cooking with her mom. She was taking guitar lessons too, did gymnastics, rode her pony, and loved to play the Atari with dad too. So as the day went on and Mary started telling her parents that she had a sore throat and visibly had a running nose, her parents were prepping to take care of their little girl. Around 4 o'clock that afternoon, Mary's mom went to the jewel store to get a 50-count container of extra strength Tylenol, the gelatin kind, because those were much easier for Mary to swallow. And so the next morning, when Mary said she wasn't feeling any better, her parents let her stay home from school for the day and gave her a Tylenol and told her to get back to sleep. That all happens around 6, the morning of September 29th, and not too long after that, Mary's parents are in the kitchen downstairs when they hear upstairs Mary get up, go to the bathroom, close the door, and then just a few moments later, they hear a really loud thud. They call out to Mary to make sure she's okay, but there was no answer. They call out again. Still no answer. So they go upstairs to check on Mary. They open the door and saw her lying on the ground, still in her pajamas, completely unconscious. Mary's parents call for help and an ambulance comes to take her to the hospital, but it's not long after that she is declared dead at just 12 years old, still in her pajamas from what was supposed to be just a sick day.
I cannot even imagine this poor family going through this. It's just so incredibly sad. You think your daughter has a cold, and before you know
Mm-hmm.
it, she's gone.
Yeah. And you know, because what I was thinking of when I was reading this case was the Julia Lynn Turner case. We did that on episode 24 of this podcast, the antifreeze killer. And it was, and I kind of got similar vibes, right? And because in all those cases, it was, someone got really sick and then all of a sudden they weren't okay. And so that's kind of the similar vibe I'm getting here as well, because I'm imagining, right, that if, your kids or anyone, right, is not feeling well and then passes away, right, like you assume that the sickness or the illness is what, contributed to that in some way, shape, or form. Spoiler alert, not exactly what happened here, for everyone listening at home. But that's it wouldn't shock me if that was the initial instinct, right?
Absolutely. That's what you would think, that it was some, illness that you missed, and you thought it was
Mm-hmm.
a cold and it wasn't. But do they have any
Right.
idea at this point? I assume they have no idea how she died.
Well, they do eventually. Not right at this moment, Mom. You're right about that. But at first, I have to imagine again. Just Mary's parents' minds are just whizzing with possibilities. I mean, Mary was getting a minor cold, but was otherwise perfectly healthy, and they had no idea what could have happened, seemingly out of the blue. But it's pretty obvious to investigators that Mary's death was not a natural one by any means. So naturally, the parents are questioned about what happened to Mary, and they are cleared relatively quickly as having anything to do with Mary's death. And they also searched through the house to see if they could find anything suspicious, and nothing really stands out as remarkably out of the ordinary. So they traced through what Mary's parents tell investigators were her movements for the day, which weren't much. She told them about the afternoon of the 28th, how Mary wasn't feeling well. She went to the store, got some Tylenol, and gave her a pill the next morning when Mary still wasn't feeling very well. And so the Tylenol seemed to stand out, right? And when they examined the Tylenol, they discover that it's not Tylenol at all. The capsules of what should have been acetaminophen was actually filled with cyanide, poison.
Absolutely horrible. And I would imagine that a lot of your listeners don't remember back as long as I do. But back before this all happened, you went to the store and you bought whatever you bought, and you just opened it up and it was open. There weren't
Mm-hmm.
aluminum covers on anything or whatever. Um, so I obviously I know a little bit about this case because I lived through it, but at this particular time, at this time of the case, they don't know what happened. So
Right.
where's the What's their guess on what happened?
Yeah, well, simply, they just don't know, Mom. I mean, but what they do know is that the Kellermans were not the only family that this was happening to. Interestingly enough, that day, September 29th, 1982, all throughout the city of Chicago, there were more victims being transported to the hospital who suddenly dropped dead after feeling like they were coming down with a cold, just like Mary. Crime Over Wine is sponsored by BetterHelp. As someone who's used therapy for years, I know that finding a therapist can sometimes be a stress on its own, juggling your full-time job, your family, your friends, your podcast, and trying to find the right therapist on top of that can almost feel impossible. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp matches you with a therapist that works for you on your terms. It's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to one of 33,000 licensed professional therapists in as little as a few days. And because finding a new therapist is a lot like finding a new bottle of wine, if you don't jive with your therapist, you can easily switch to a new one at no additional cost. You can get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp by going to betterhelp.com/crimeoverwine. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/crimeoverwine for 10% off your first month. Join over 4 million people who decided to get help and get happy with BetterHelp. 15 minutes away from where the Kellermans were living on September 29th, 1982, the same day as Mary's death, 27-year-old Adam Janus was staying home from work because he wasn't feeling well. Similarly to Mary, Adam felt like he caught a cold. He had a sore throat, a runny nose, a bit of a headache, feeling a bit feverish. So that afternoon, he went to pick his kids up from preschool, and on his way home from work, he stopped at the drugstore to pick up some over-the-counter Tylenol. They came home, they had lunch, and after lunch, he said he was going to take his Tylenol and lie down for a nap. Well, just a few minutes later, Adam's kids were shocked when their dad came stumbling back into the kitchen, clearly not well, and collapsed right there in front of them. Adam was rushed to the hospital, and he died not long after that.
It's just so terrible. It really is. And especially in front of his two young children, they must have been
Right.
petrified.
Oh, so scared. And again, like just to clarify here too, right? Like this is all happening all at the same time because like Mary and Adam basically, right? Like they're in different hospitals, different parts of the city, but same day, same hours that all this craziness is happening with Mary, the same thing is happening with Adam.
Same location, right? They live in the same general area.
Yeah, they live 15 minutes away from each other, all within, you know, the city limits of Chicago. So I mean, it's all, but like the dots haven't all fully connected yet. But they're about to, in like probably the most tragic way possible. And so let's get there because it, as crazy this case is, it just gets even crazier. When the rest of Adam's family showed up at the hospital, they wept over his sudden passing, and doctors told them that it was likely his heart that just gave out and killed him. So, really, just distraught over this whole situation, the family goes back to Adam's house, and there is the bottle of pills that Adam had just taken a few hours earlier. And at this point, Adam's 25-year-old brother Stanley and his wife Terry had also started not to feel very well.
Right.
Again, they felt like they were coming down with a really bad cold. And so, look, it had been a rough day for the family to say the least, and their emotions had run their course. So they decided they had no time for this cold. They were not about to put up with that, and they each take 2 more Tylenol pills to calm their fevers. Well, just moments later, the couple collapses too. They rush to the hospital and are pronounced dead just hours after Adam had died.
Oh my God, just horrible. Absolutely horrible.
All in a day, right? I mean, like I can't imagine being Adam and Stanley's parents or like they had kids and that kind of like it's just it all happens
Right.
all at the same
Right.
time.
And again, our crime sleuth minds would go to the Tylenol immediately, but at this point
Mm-hmm.
in the world, Tylenol is Tylenol, you know?
Well, yeah, very true. And again, like like hours before, the doctor said his heart gave out. Like it was a natural
Right.
thing. Like unfortunately, like there was something in there that compounded it. little did they know that they were about to take the thing that compounded
Right.
his heart attack, you know? So yeah, I mean, it's crazy, right? Like they didn't think twice about that, obviously, like at the moment. And why would you? Like, why would you even think that he could have possibly even been poisoned by
Absolutely, you would.
the Tylenol in the medicine cabinet?
Right.
Well, a woman named Helen Jensen, who was the neighborhood's only public health official, is asked to investigate the deaths of the Januses. By this point, it was obvious that these were not natural deaths by any means. That ship had sailed, and investigators' interests are piqued, and they hadn't even connected the dots about the Januses and the Kellermans and all that. So Helen goes to the Januses' home to conduct an investigation, which is when she sees that Tylenol bottle and a receipt that said it had been purchased the same day. The Tylenol bottle had 6 pills missing, 2 each for Adam, Stanley, and Terry, and Helen raises an eyebrow over this and sends the pills to the toxicologist to get them tested. And just like the pills Mary had taken, the Janus's Tylenol capsules had been replaced with cyanide.
It's just so incredibly sick. Just sick to think that this could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
need another sip.
Yeah, sure do. Well, this was not all either, Mom. Again, like if this is coming at you quick, it's about to come at you even quicker. There were 3 other people that day in the city of Chicago who had gotten sick, taken Tylenol, collapsed, and died all within hours.
Horrible.
They were 31-year-old Mary McFarland, 27-year-old Lynn Rainier, and 35-year-old Paula Prince. And investigators were able to trace the pills back to at least 6 different stores in the Chicago area. The FBI had gotten involved by this point, and they were really on edge about the possibility of Tylenol being sold in mass that was actually poison.
Right.
According to reporting by the Chicago Tribune, investigators were able to determine that the Tylenol bottles that Adam and the Kellermans had bought came from the same lot, the same batch of Tylenol pills, and that all of the bottles that killed people in the Chicago area were manufactured in Pennsylvania and Texas by a subsidiary of the drug manufacturing giant Johnson & Johnson. And so, again, this was an unreal situation, right? Like, who could have imagined this would have happened? But luckily, they were able to determine that the drugs were switched with cyanide after the manufacturing process, and they were likely replaced right on the shelves of the store. And they had no reason to believe that there was any danger to anyone outside of the Chicago metropolitan area. But still, better safe than sorry, right, in this type of situation. And so investigators hold a press conference on September 30th, just a day after all of these deaths, warning the public of this massive conspiracy involving a heavily used over-the-counter pain medication. And Johnson & Johnson ends up issuing a massive recall of their Tylenol, the largest recall in pharmaceutical history. Overall, as reported by the Boston Globe, the company had spent more than $150 million to recall more than 31 million containers and on a PR campaign to restore consumer confidence afterwards.
So are they thinking at this point that it was a problem at the factory and that's why they did a massive recall like that? Or was it just to calm people's nerves?
So no, so they very much so believe that someone had gone into their store, into a store or multiple stores, and replaced the Tylenol with poison on the shelves. They somehow, I don't really know exactly how, but they were able to say pretty definitively that they went out of the factories, out of the manufacturing process as Tylenol, and everything was okay. And somehow they were able to figure out and say pretty confidently that when they went on the shelves, someone went into the store, replaced the pills, and that was the end of it.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to verify that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tylenol is certainly, commonplace today, but back then it had really just risen to widespread use in hindsight. Tylenol was first sold over the counter in 1960, and by 1982, it accounted for 35% of the over-the-counter pain reliever market. And just weeks after the murders, it plummeted to less than 8%. So this was like no easy feat in rolling back all of these pills or in convincing the public that they were okay to return to using them afterwards. Luckily, no one else had died as a result of those pills, at least no one whose death was definitively tied back to the Tylenol. But the obvious question here is who was behind all of this? Who was the sick person who poisoned seemingly random people for what appeared to be no reason at all? But just days after the murders happened, amidst the hysteria and the panic that had swept across the country, investigators get a pretty darn good suspect.
Hello, Crime Over Wine listeners. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We are the hosts of Like Mother, Like Murder.
We bring you the good, the badass, and the crime.
Each week, we bring you stories from missing and murdered
to survivors and women who empower you.
And of course, some mom talk sprinkled in.
Check us out wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother, Like Murder.
And give us a follow on social media so that we can say hi.
Okay, love you, bye.
Okay, love you, bye.
All right, Mom, so how is your wine tasting? I am really getting a whole lot of flavors the more I sip on this.
I do. I think I'm getting a little bit more, instead of just the smell of the licorice, I think I'm getting it, like you said, at the back of my tongue.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like that, and I mean this in a good way, almost like a sinus clearing taste back there. And I don't mean it like a medicine taste. It's just, it's nice.
No, it's strong enough, and
Yes.
it is kind of like medicine-esque. I know what you mean, because it kind of it's a similar sensation, I feel like, as like cold medicine, in that you get a lot of that back in the back of the mouth, because that's what I feel like cold medicine kind of is you get like that bad feeling in the back, bad taste in the back of your mouth. This is a good taste, to be clear,
right.
But like it's the same kind of like feeling in terms of order of operations, I suppose, if you want to put it that way.
I think it's a nice, and it's a nice smelling wine too. I like the smell of it.
Yeah. I typically, again, I enjoy my wines a little less fruity. Like I like my red wines to just like really just like hit me kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like this is like a little bit fruitier and a little bit like more subtle than I typically enjoy. But it's still very, it's thick. It's like a super dark red kind of thing. And so I do for that side of the things, I do enjoy it for that reason. Because it's for, if it could also be I'm not really in the mood for like a darker wine right now, because like, wines kind of go with your mood kind of thing.
Yes.
But I do, if I could really see sitting in front of the fireplace kind of thing and just like sipping this thing, and I could get into that.
Absolutely. And I do think that when I was, closer to your age, I did like that. And I still like a strong red. I'm a strong red drinking person, but I find that now I enjoy blends a little more, and a little, not a sweet wine at all, but a little more berry. So it maybe,
sure.
I'm really liking this one.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like it's funny because I feel like the older I get, the more I just really like it. Just like a real, bold, dry red wine. That's all. That's what I crave at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so like, it's kind of funny how that's happening. But, talking about like really dark things, we're in the midst of like a really dark case. And it's about to get crazy. We're about to have the twist of a lifetime. So let's talk about that, Mom, because we have a lot to discuss right now.
Let's do that.
So in early October of the same year as all of this happening, executives at Johnson & Johnson receive a really cryptic letter in the mail. And Mom, I'm hoping that you're going to be able to read it for us.
Okay. Gentlemen, as you can see, it is easy to place cyanide, both potassium and sodium, into capsules sitting on store shelves. And since the cyanide is inside the gelatin, it is easy to get buyers to swallow the bitter pill. Another beauty is that cyanide operates quickly. It takes so very little, and there will be no time to take countermeasures. If you don't mind the publicity of these little capsules, then do nothing. So far, I have spent less than $50, and it takes me less than 10 minutes per bottle. If you want to stop the killing, then wire $1 million to the bank account number 8449597 at Continental Illinois Bank, Chicago, Illinois. Don't attempt to involve the FBI or local Chicago authorities with this letter. A couple of phone calls by me will undo anything you can possibly do. Ugh, boy, that
Yeah.
even just reading that and knowing that someone wrote that gave me
Right.
a disgusting feeling.
Yeah, well, and so again, like a lot of things to digest here, right? But like the first part is, so you spent less than $50 to kill 7 people, hypothetically speaking, right? If that's where like the direction we're going in here, and again, you're like bragging that it took you less than 10 minutes to do this whole thing, but like also very detailed at the same time, right? So like, and we're gonna come back to this a little bit later on, so definitely keep this in mind. But like the fact that like both potassium and sodium, like okay, like how do you know what kind of cyanide were in these pills? Unless you put it there.
Right.
And then also too, from like a police perspective, right, of like him saying like, oh, don't bother the authorities, like spoiler alert here, like they don't take that advice, like they don't like take well to this at all, and they immediately involve the police, so like that didn't really work out all that well. But it is interesting that the last line, a couple of phone calls by me will undo anything you can possibly do.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand what that meant.
I don't understand what that means either, unless the only thing I can think of is that he has some sort of connections specifically with police and investigators somehow, that like he seems to think that like, if you call police, he can just make one call to his buddy and like this will just go away.
Yeah, that doesn't, I still don't quite understand that. But, did they have any idea who this culprit is at this point?
Well, investigators are able to figure out that the letter was sent by 36-year-old James Lewis. He's a father with a bit of a checkered past, and we're going to get more into that checkered past a little bit later on, so definitely hold that thought. But James was born in Memphis, Tennessee as Theodore Wilson. He was the youngest of 7 kids, but when he was just a year old, his father left the family and abandoned all of them. So trying to make things work and give her kids the best life possible, James's mother moved to Joplin, Missouri because it was cheaper, she could work and raise 7 kids all on her own, at least it seemed that way. But not long after the move, James's mother decided she couldn't do this alone. There was no way that one woman could raise 7 kids on the income that she was making, so she gave up. She abandoned the kids too, and James was adopted at just 2 years old, which is when his name officially changed to James Lewis. Well, again, a lot happened between then and 1982, but we are going to get there, I promise, and I know all of you are going to want to hear this, so just bear with me here. But fast forwarding to 1982, though, and investigators tie him back to this threatening and damning letter sent to Johnson & Johnson, and they ask him about it. At this point, James was living with his wife in New York City, not in Chicago, and as part of this interview, James tells police something really interesting, and what feels like a pretty strong motive for being behind this whole thing, if he really is. James tells investigators that in 1974, his 5-year-old daughter Toni had died after the sutures that were used to fix her congenital heart defect tore, and he never let that go. I mean, who can really blame him for holding a bit of a grudge? Maybe not to the extent that we're all assuming here, but still. But investigators believe that this letter was sent as an act of revenge against the company, and they believe that the poisonings were too.
So I don't want to jump the gun, but they're suspecting that this guy did it, or this is kind of what we know and now looking backwards, because I'm a little confused about that part.
So they were able to figure out that this dude sent the letter.
Okay.
They go talk to him, and then this all kind of unravels in one way, shape, or form.
Okay.
And so they're like, well, that sounds like a pretty darn good motive to me. Like, if you blame this company for killing your kid, then like maybe you try to mess with them a good bit, and try to tank their stocks.
What a sad life. I mean, again, I don't care how horrible your life was. You don't have the right to murder people, but what a sad existence this man seemingly have.
It sure is. Yeah. And I always think about this, right, whenever we talk about like these kinds of backgrounds of people, of like, it just seems as though, like, I don't know what kind of support he had it didn't sound like a whole lot, and it's even less more as more we go down. So like, just keep this in mind. But like, it just seems as though like, someone should have intervened at some point, and like, if someone had intervened at some point, like, who knows what would have happened. Right. So I don't know how all that played out, but it makes you wonder about like, when you look into these people's backgrounds, and you find out all of these things, if somebody had just, made a phone call or put him somewhere, to get the help that he needed, like, who knows what could have happened, or maybe nothing would have happened. Maybe nothing would have changed,
right.
But
You don't know if he was born evil or became evil
right.
because of his circumstances. Yeah.
Right. But point being is like, you can try, right?
Right,
Like, you can try. And again, I don't know if anyone did. I don't know if anyone didn't, but it seems as though evidently, the ending was poor.
It seems like he needed some help somewhere down the line.
Oh, yeah.
Even if, and I get it, if your daughter, if you're going to blame a hospital or a doctor or the company that manufactured the sutures that, and then your daughter died, that's horribly sad, but
yeah.
But somewhere in there's something not right.
Right. And I can see, again, that happening, right? When it's like, you need someone to blame, and like, right. you are like red with revenge, and like, I can see that being the emotional reaction. Can't see, again, if he really is behind all this, can't see like murdering a bunch of innocent people had nothing to do with your daughter's death as a result of that.
Right.
Yeah. But James, though, denies ever having anything to do with the poisonings. He reiterates that he wasn't even living in Chicago at the time. He was living in New York City, and that there was no way that he could have been involved in the poisonings. But he does admit to writing the letter, however, in a fit of rage in reaction to news about the murders. So police end up arresting James and charging him with extortion for sending the letter and demanding money. Okay. But police are hell-bent on the idea that James was responsible for much more than just a letter. They believe that he himself replaced the Tylenol pills with poison to hurt the company as an act of revenge for his daughter's death. And frankly, James's background doesn't do him any favors either. So again, hold on tight, refill those glasses. Y'all are going to need it. This was far from James's first run-in with the law. In 1966, when James was just 19, he went missing for about 2 days before he was found in a shallow pond, apparently trying to drown himself. Oh. He was brought back to his house, but his mental break did not end there. Once he was back at the house, James demanded that he be given access to his stepfather's gun cabinet, but his stepfather refused, and James responded with an outburst, attacked his stepfather, breaking several of his ribs in the process. Both of his parents ran from the house while James threatened them with an axe. Oh my God. He was arrested on assault charges and stayed in the county jail for 3 weeks before he attempted to take his own life, again by taking 36 aspirin all at once. He was released from jail and committed to a state psychiatric institution as a result. And in 1978, James was actually charged with murder. James's daughter had developed an attachment to an elderly client of his while James worked as a tax accountant. And then suddenly the client's dismembered body was found stuffed into a plastic bag and hung from the ceiling in the man's attic. James was charged with the man's death after he forged a check in Raymond's name for $5,000. But the charges ended up being dropped over scrutiny from a procedural error. James was not read his Miranda rights when he was arrested, which was and still is required for officers to do during each and every arrest they make.
I hate when I hear about something like this where something as simple as the Miranda rights is going to get. Mm-hmm. And I understand why those were put into place to protect people in the first place, but when they're then used to free someone who,
right.
I mean, I don't know, because I don't know all the facts in this, but let's just say he is guilty of this. Freeing someone who's committed a murder, it just is
right.
Come on, there's got to be a different way to do this.
It sure does. Yeah. And at the very least, like, guilty of fraud, right? If he's caught, forging the check, which absolutely. Again seems to me like a pretty guilty person of murder, right? Like, right. Someone just dies, then you just happen to get their checkbook.
And obviously not a stable individual given his right. past anyways. Oh my God.
Right. Yeah. And again, like, just to reiterate here, like, my understanding is that like the daughter like was just really interested in this man, like, for for whatever reason, like just became very friendly with
Right.
him. And
Doesn't mean he should die.
right. Well, but based on what I read, that's why he targeted this dude. Which is just, I mean, like unwell, right? And like, but like, point being, right, like, is that frankly, if somebody is capable of all of these things, right, like you're certainly capable of doing what he is assumed to have done to all these people.
Absolutely.
And possibly even more of them if they didn't, you know, if they didn't catch it in time.
Exactly.
So yeah, so I mean, it's just it's crazy. So yeah, and again too, like, and I kind of what you're saying, Mom, right? Like I understand the Miranda rights. I get that should be a thing, 100,000%. And it just kind of reminds me, right, that like the people who, you know, who are investigating these types of situations, who are prosecuting these types of situations, are human beings, right? And like, you know, make mistakes, and unfortunately, right, like if I make a mistake in my job, like I'll be okay, like I'll be there Monday, but like you make a mistake in your job, and you're affecting lots of people's lives.
Right.
Yeah, and it's just really, it's unfortunate.
Oh, just
That's
infuriating though.
the reality.
Yep.
Yeah, it is infuriating. Well, you know, that was not all either, Mom. In 1981, James was under investigation for mail fraud in Kansas City because apparently he just wasn't hitting enough crimes on his bingo board.
Heck, this guy had his hand in everything.
Right, exactly. It was all in relation to a credit card scam. There isn't a ton of details out there about what exactly James was under investigation for allegedly doing, but he did move to Chicago as the investigation intensified, as this apparent way to get away from that life or that investigation. He lived there for about 9 months before moving to New York with his wife in September, right before the murders happened in Chicago in 1982. So we're right back. We did the whole circle for James's life, and now we're right back at the beginning.
So he was in Chicago, maybe not at the exact time of the murders, but certainly in time to maybe stick something on a back shelf, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, very good point. Right. Yeah. And he openly admits that he lived in Chicago. Like he wasn't hiding that much of his life, but his point was that he, like, on the day that it happened, he wasn't there.
Oh.
Yeah, right. But, and there was even, so the police, listen to this too. So police, like interviewed his friends, and family and everyone around him. And there was this one friend who was like most vocally, you know, saying that James probably had something to do with this. And apparently, as this friend tells police, that James had told the friend that he, like, very intentionally, like, walked in, and openly admitted, walked in front of security cameras in New York City, as a way to, like, validate his alibi. That he wasn't living in Chicago, that he was actually living in New York City at the time. And that is the way that he is proving that he had nothing to do with this.
But I get it if the murders were that someone was stabbed in Chicago on Saturday and you can prove you were in New York on Friday and Saturday, okay, you weren't there. But when it's something like this, the timeline is a little bit extended, I would imagine.
Right.
And just so you know, I did just report. I'm just saying.
Oh, good. Well, I know you needed that for sure, because we have there's a lot going on here, right? But also, and playing devil's advocate here, right? Like a little bit in favor of James, hypothetically speaking, right here, like that, because kind of what you just alluded to, because that's kind of how I pictured this whole thing happening. If he did indeed do it, was like just sticking it into the back of a shelf somewhere, and just like, you know, like once it cycles through, it cycles through. But like also, if he really truly wasn't living in Chicago at the time, he was living in New York City, like, how do you time that out so that, like, all the people, all your victims, all buy it on the same day, take it on the same day? True. Yeah, because like if you were in Chicago at the time, which, like, frankly, who's to say that he didn't, go to Chicago, do this like right before close, and like get the first bus to New York City, to be fair. But point being is that, like, how do you if you were in Chicago, I could see how you planned it out so that way you put it all in the front row, all these people who are who bought these drugs, got it on that day, all on the same day. Like, that would make sense to me. But like, how do you plan that out so that way it would cycle through and then everyone buys it and takes it on the same day?
But I think about when I buy Tylenol, I don't necessarily. Sometimes you buy it because you need it that day. Sometimes it's like, oh, I've only got 2 left in my little pill bottle, so I'm going to buy them. So you don't even really know when people are going to take them. And three of the people, the 3 family members, took it from the same pill. I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying though, for sure. And like, again, listen, I'm not like, I firmly believe that he did this, but
Although the little girl, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. I should remember her name, but the
Mary.
12-year-old little girl, Mary, thank you. Her parents did buy it the day she took it,
Right.
and the other gentleman did take it the day he.
Right.
So you're right. How do you plan
Yeah.
that out that they're going to buy it?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't know. I vaguely kind of remember that the other three had also bought it the same day as well. So sure. And like, to be fair, right. Like if I'm out of Tylenol, right? Like I'm probably not going to go buy it unless
Until
I
you
need
need
it.
it.
You
Sure.
know? Yes. Cause
I'm a little
like
crazy
odds
like
are.
that. I like to have mine.
Sure. Well, maybe, right? Like I like, again, actually I know I'm out of it right now, frankly. And so like, but I haven't bought it because it's not in my mind because I don't have a headache or don't have whatever right now. So like that is probably like, I feel like that's how most people would operate on that front. That's just like, obviously there's no data to back that up. That's just like my instinct and how I roll about that.
Right.
But I could also, but also because then you have it, you're not going to take a whole pill in a week or a whole bottle in a week.
Right.
So then you have it for a long time.
Oh,
So I don't know.
that's so cool.
I'm just going for like human behavior here. I feel like that makes sense. But so anyway, so point being is I feel like that's like a fairly strong piece of evidence in his favor, to say, or evidence anecdote in his favor. Because again, how do you plan that out unless you're there to like make it happen?
Right. Right.
So, well, James, was starting to look more and more like their guy, but they didn't have anything tying him directly to the murders, just a lot of very circumstantial evidence besides that letter, which feels pretty admission-y to me, but beside the point. Police said for years that they believed that they built a very chargeable case, but the district attorney said there wasn't enough evidence to charge him with murder and to get a conviction, which I can kind of see. James is convicted for extortion the next year and is sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, and he was released in 1995. By 2004, James was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and had once again gotten into deep trouble with the law. He was accused of aggravated rape and drugging a person with intent to stupefy or overpower for sexual intercourse. He was charged with those 2 counts plus 4 other ones and was held without bail until 2007, when the victim in this case decided not to move forward on prosecution for reasons that are unknown to me right now. So the charges were dropped.
So my first thought was, generally when I think of someone who robs a bank, they're a bank robber. When I think of someone who steals car, they're
right.
This guy he's
hitting the whole board.
Goes into everything, right? Like, but also he's like what's the expression for the mob guy? The Teflon Don.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
keep skating on all this stuff. I don't understand that.
Yeah, it feels like the freaking Murphy's Law of cases, right? Like, yeah, it's like you can't get anything to stick. I mean, at least they got him on the letter, but like that was 12 years for extortion. Like that's hardly justice.
If he's guilty of all the things that we've read about so far, he should never see the light of day. I mean, 10 times over.
Yeah, listen, I simply cannot imagine how you read that letter and say, yes, he did this and is guilty of writing this letter and this illegal thing, but not saying, oh, he's guilty
of the murder.
Of the murders. Yeah, because that is an admission right there in black and white.
Right. And I get it in this, in 2023, 2024 time frame, video cameras are everywhere. CCTV and ring doorbells and everything. And back in 1982, back in the 1990s, the video cameras weren't as big. So I get that they can't use that. But this seems like more than circumstantial evidence that this guy had his hand in it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I don't know what else like the prosecutor knows, right? Like I have to imagine that they have something else there to like make them think that like it could look, go in the other favor for them. Mm-hmm. But also too, like you don't want like, and we talk about this all the time on Crime Over Wine, right? Like we don't want a situation, right, where they go to trial and they don't have all the evidence, like they don't have a freaking ironclad case against this dude, and he gets off, and then it's over, right? Like you don't have any luck of doing that.
Yeah,
I kind of get the hesitation, but 40 years. That's a long
Yeah.
time, right? To just like wait,
Yes.
to see if the new evidence comes.
Right.
But again, I don't know what all they have. I don't know what they know beyond what has been publicized.
Mm.
But, that same year, as speculation continued about James Lewis being the Tylenol killer and police continuing to push that publicly, James created a website to make the case for his innocence. It's no longer up today, but it lays out why he wasn't and couldn't have been the Tylenol killer. But police believe that the website was only created to taunt police and who still hadn't gathered enough evidence to prove his guilt once and for all. He had even started to refer to himself as the Tylenol man, and the people who lived in his apartment building in Cambridge even told reporters that he referred to himself that way privately too. So, Mom, there's like this really wild line in this website. I'm hoping you're going to be able to read it for us.
Okay. In a quarter of a century, I have not been able to escape the Tylenol man label. A Google search of James plus Lewis plus Tylenol yields over 240,000 documents, and the list is growing. After 25 years of cringing in fear, I am tired of hiding in silence. I will not run and hide anymore. I will now face this controversy head on. Yikes. What the heck does that mean?
Yeah, a little cryptic, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and also you can't escape the Tylenol man label. Well, maybe because you're
right.
calling yourself the Tylenol man.
Right. Yeah, you are calling yourself that. Yeah, that is fair. But also too, I mean, again, like devil's advocate here, right? Like if he's innocent, like I could see how that is just absolutely maddening, right? Where it's just like if you didn't do anything wrong and yet people are still like slamming you into saying that that you did.
Right.
I could see how that could end up being just exhausting.
I don't know. If people were accusing me of some horrific, deplorable crime like this one, I would do my best to separate myself from any of those monikers.
Right. Yeah. Don't call yourself Tylenol man. Right. Yeah. And again too, like frankly, like step up and like if you really don't and think you did it, like step up and like prove that you didn't, you know what I mean? Because like right now there's so much air of mystery going on and like everything like it seems as though like most of the puzzle is kind of is constructed to point toward you,
right? And
like really just there's like a couple pieces missing and like maybe those pieces don't exist because if you really didn't do it, but like it seems as though everything's pointing in your direction. So like if you really truly like know you didn't do anything wrong, prove it.
Right. And don't say I'm going to face the controversy head on.
Right.
Like what does that mean?
Yeah, right. That sounds like every like mass shooter's like last words kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, again, James was never charged with the murders that were related to the pills, but that wasn't for lack of police persisting on it. Even 25 years later, and it appeared as though they finally were about to catch him slipping. Get ready for that big test with Study.com. Study.com offers learning materials and test prep, even LSAT study prep guides for all of my legal nerds listening. Unfortunately, there aren't any wine study guides, and believe me, I did check. Listeners can get 30% off their first 3 months of any subscription level using the promo code CrimeOverWine. Again, that's promo code CrimeOverWine, no spaces, for 30% off your first 3 months at Study.com. Learn faster, stay motivated, study smarter with our sponsor, Study.com. Between 2007 and 2008, federal agents had conducted an undercover operation on James. They recorded a ton of undercover conversations with him, asking him about the letter and the poisonings. And as part of those conversations, James said that it took him about 3 days to write the letter, which is really interesting to them, and here's why. At this point, they were able to figure out that the letter had been sent on October 1st, 1982. So an easy calculation, again, not great at math, but like I can do this math, would allow anyone to figure out that 3 days before October 1st was September 29th, the day of the murders, and the day before investigators had said a word about them publicly.
So how did he know to even start composing the letter if he didn't know this was going to happen?
Right. Unless you did know.
Right.
Right. Well, investigators pressed him on it in a follow-up interview about his comments, and after a brief pause, he said that he must have had a faulty memory, and he brushed it off. So suspicious, a little odd, but certainly not necessarily fully incriminating. So still, James is not arrested with anything, but he does start saying some really wild stuff, Mom. He agrees to help investigators find the real killer across multiple different interviews. And as part of that help, he provides really specific details on how someone could have replaced the acetaminophen with cyanide without customers discovering that the drugs had been tampered with, including sketches. And, the sketches are just absolutely, beyond belief. Go look it up. We're going to link to it on our website.
Oh my God. Seriously? How do you even begin to say things like, oh, I'm going to help you. I'll show you how this could have happened.
Right.
Who would ever imagine how this could have happened unless you were the one who made it happen?
Yeah, certainly not a freaking tax accountant, right? You're it's not like if you were some pharmacist, sure, okay, I would believe you, but that's not you, James. That's not who you are. Right. So it's just weird that it's weird. And again, you would think that if you really truly had nothing to do with this, you would want to be far the hell away from it as possible. Right. And so I just don't imagine why you'd want to be oh yeah, I'll help you.
Right, because you're
I'll show you how to do it,
and you did it.
Right, exactly. Well, the FBI also found a book on poisoning in a search of James's apartment and found fingerprints on the pages related to cyanide. But still, somehow, it wasn't enough to convince the DA to bring charges, so James walked free. Police had apparently interviewed James several times over the next few years, as recently as 2022. And while murders directly related to the Tylenol killings were non-existent, investigators believe a number of copycats made their marks. There were 3 deaths from suspected poisonings in 1986. 23-year-old Diane Ellsroth in Yonkers, New York, and Susan Snow and Bruce Nickel in Washington State. In the case of Susan and Bruce, however, Bruce's wife Stella was arrested and convicted for murder. I'll let all of your imaginations run wild about how that happened.
Right.
There were apparently many more murders over the next decade over the Tylenol killings, but they eventually did end up dying down. All the way up until July of 2023, just a few months ago from when we're recording this episode, James Lewis was found dead at 76 at his home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. His wife was out of town at the time and asked his friend to go check on him, and there he was, along with any hope, as far as investigators were concerned, of bringing charges for the Tylenol killings. In several interviews with reporters, investigators and prosecutors made it incredibly clear that they believed James Lewis was the Tylenol killer all the way up until his death. Retired FBI Special Agent Roy Lane told the Chicago Tribune, quote, "James Lewis's death ends a lifetime of cruelty to others and a compulsive need for revenge. His death puts the pursuit of justice to an end." Former Assistant U.S. Attorney Jeremy Margolis told the Chicago Tribune, quote, "I was saddened to learn of James Lewis's death, not because he's dead, but because he didn't die in prison."
Well, I appreciate and agree with her sentiment, but then I also think, then why didn't you guys do something else to get this guy convicted? And I also have to throw out there, I cannot believe this man was married.
That's fair. Yeah. And for a long time, by the way, for a very, very long time, because again, remember he moved from Chicago to New York. So with his wife. So they were married for a long time. But yeah, no, I totally agree. And again, I kind of get that because I certainly listen, I believe in if you commit a murder, you belong in jail for the rest of your life. And so I'm not one to wish death on anybody by any means, shape, or form. But certainly if you're going to die in any way, assuming that this dude actually did this thing, I want you to have died behind bars. And that's where I want your final moments to exist.
Agreed.
Well, Mom, there is one more layer, in case there aren't enough layers in this case to be unfolded, to all of this, that I have to tell you about. It's actually, Mom, a second person who was largely considered a suspect in the murders, at times just as much as James Lewis was. Crime Over Wine is proud to support Emancipet, Unlike episodes of Crime Over Wine, veterinary care shouldn't be a mystery, which is why Emancipet is making vet care affordable and accessible to everyone. Emancipet is a nonprofit organization that operates an ever-expanding network of low-cost veterinary clinics in neighborhoods across the country, offering discounted and free vaccines, flea and tick treatments, spay and neuter surgeries, and much more. Learn more and support Emancipet's mission at emancipet.org. The suspect's name was Roger Arnold, and here's how he had gotten into the mix. A bar owner had actually reported Roger to police after Roger apparently told the bar owner that he had bought a large amount of cyanide about 6 months before the poisoning, and had been discussing killing lots of people with a white powder as he was becoming more and more erratic after his marriage had just ended. When police searched for Roger's house, they found 5 guns, books on explosives and poisonings, including a book that describes how to make potassium cyanide, vials, beakers, test tubes, and a white granulated powder, which police said was not cyanide, and no cyanide was found at the house, to be clear. And if that wasn't eyebrow-raising enough, listen to this. Roger worked with one of the Tylenol killing victim's father. Roger had apparently worked with Mary Rainier's father at a warehouse, and Roger's wife had been treated at a hospital right across the street from the store where Mary had bought the Tylenol that later killed her. After this bar owner caused him so much trouble, Roger was pissed. In 1983, he was charged with shooting and killing a man named John Stanisha, a father of 3 who Roger had mistaken for the bar owner. He was convicted the following year and served 15 years of a 30-year sentence for second-degree murder. He died in June of 2008, having never been charged with the Tylenol killer, to be clear. But in June of 2010, police had Roger's body exhumed to extract DNA from his femur bone to test it against DNA found on the Tylenol containers, and it was not a match. All at the same time, police also tested James's DNA against the sample on the bottle and requested DNA from Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. But those samples were not matches either.
So obviously I know who Ted Kaczynski is, but I don't remember when the Unabomber struck. Was this before he was the Unabomber? I'm just curious. But I also think that this gentleman also sounds like a crazy human being.
Oh, yeah.
But the evidence to me doesn't follow him as closely as it does James.
No, and like again, that was like obviously a very abridged version of of Roger's involvement in this whole thing. But like also too, I mean, like if the shoe fits kind of thing. Like frankly, like there are some parts of it that I'm like, that sounds better than James in some cases. You know what I mean?
But why would he poison random people rather than the people he, I mean, this seems like he was targeting the people he hated. So why?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. And so again, like the motive is not there for sure, at least from what I've seen. But to be fair though, right, like if he has this personal relationship with a victim in some way, even if it's just the victim's father, like, okay, sure, like that seems to connect the dots that way, but not entirely. Like it seems as though James had a better motive, but Roger definitely had a stronger connection to these people for sure, at least one of them. But also too, and like maybe the DNA is just like a red herring in this whole thing, but also the fact that like none of their DNA matched. Yeah, that's kind of wild to me. But also it could have been any kind of DNA, right? And
I'm sorry, maybe I missed this part. When were they testing the DNA? Like how far advanced was DNA testing at the point?
Oh, this was 2010 when they were testing the DNA. Yeah, okay. So it was pretty advanced at this point. Okay. Yeah, maybe not as advanced as 2023, but it was advanced enough. So, okay. But police, though, didn't seem to be as convinced of Roger's guilt as they were of James's. But interestingly, some family members of some of the victims didn't seem to be as convinced of James being the true Tylenol killer as police were. Michelle Rosen, Mary Rainier's daughter, told the Chicago Tribune in 2022, quote, Lewis was convicted of his opportunistic act and spent 12 years in prison for it. I am appalled that they still circle back to him as the possible murderer. This inhibits the investigation and influences the public into believing a false
Well,
narrative.
so I wonder what her thoughts were further than just this. Like, why
Sure.
didn't she think he was the guy? That's
Yeah, and and let's also keep in mind. So this is Mary Rainier's daughter, who is the one who Rogers knew her dad, and so maybe Michelle is like liking Roger a little bit more because
oh,
because of that connection.
okay.
That would make sense to
Yes,
me.
that would make sense to me too. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, but point being, because that when I read that, I thought that was kind of wild,
Yeah.
right? Because most of the time, it's it's the victim's family being so convinced and hell bent that this person was guilty, and police being a little bit more hesitant, and so the fact that these roles are reversed is kind of wild to me. Because kind of like that was my initial thought. It was like, okay, well, if it's not James, then who is it?
Right. But
You know what I mean? And like,
it was the other guy.
right,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, I mean that makes I don't know what she thinks, but that makes a logical amount of sense to me.
Okay. Right.
So I don't know, but again, it's just crazy to me that like all the evidence seems to point to James, and yet the family members aren't even convinced. And they seem to be the people who would be most likely to make a gut instinct kind of call,
Yeah, but
even if that gut instinct isn't right.
what did the other families think? I
Hmm.
wonder,
Yeah, and I didn't see that. This is one family member, yeah,
and the
of
one who had a relationship with the other guy. So,
right,
okay.
yeah,
All right.
right, exactly. The murders, though, kind of what we were talking about before, Mom, did change the pharmaceutical industry for good and for the better. The tragedies changed the way that products are packaged and sold everywhere. Almost immediately after the murders, Johnson & Johnson implemented tamper-proof packaging, including foil seals and tamper-resistant wrapping, so if a product had been tampered with, the consumer would know for sure. In 1983, those changes became an industry standard, and it became a federal law that companies of all kinds, from drugs to food, would have to follow this anti-product tampering law titled the Tylenol Bill.
Yes. And I, again, similar to what we were discussing with the Miranda law, I know that these laws were put into place for incredibly good reasons. However, when you're trying to open, your container of orange juice and it's spilling all over you,
Yeah.
you have
Right,
this
right.
situation to thank for it.
Yeah, listen, I strongly believe that there are some companies and some products that take it a little bit too far.
Or Liam, or do they? Right? I mean,
Yeah, sure.
until they don't, and then someone
Yeah,
I should
that's
stop
fair.
complaining about it.
Sure, yeah, but again, so like there's your fun fact for the week, right? Like this is why that this all exists, is because of going back to all this. But I mean, and it's a shame, I guess, that like that this had to happen for that to happen.
Yes.
But also thinking back to, I mean, again, I was not alive in 1982, but like I think back to like thinking back to like what it was like in 1982, right? Like it's like who would have even freaking imagined that this would have happened, right?
And you never would have, and until this came to light, you never thought
Mm-hmm.
about just opening your container of whatever and
Right.
trusting it. You had trust in everything you consumed or
Mm-hmm.
rubbed on your body or whatever. You
Right.
had complete faith that it was safe.
Yeah. Yeah, and like credit, because a lot of times, right, like the companies and like that are intimately involved in the situation on the back end of it, like kind of do some weird stuff that like you're not like it's like you're kind of weirded out by kind of their reaction to this whole
Yeah.
thing. But credit to these guys, right, because they took like immediate swift action to like to make sure this didn't happen again, to the point where like the I think I read in a couple of different articles when I was doing research for this case that like the PR response from on behalf of Johnson and Johnson to this whole thing is like still to this day like looked at as like the model of like crisis PR and like what that should
Right.
end up being.
Right.
So
And you gotta, in a way, no, in a big way, feel bad for Johnson and Johnson. It wasn't their
mhm.
fault that some psychopath
They did
decided
nothing
to
wrong.
tamper.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and what they didn't do anything wrong, and yet here they were having to, recall and defend their company brand and the whole bit. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
it's a sad
Yeah.
thing.
Well, because I'm positive, right? Like the initial reaction to this all happening
Oh,
had to have been that this company fucked up some way, right?
absolutely. First,
Yeah.
from what I can remember, and I wasn't that young, but still naive enough to not really care.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was a junior in high school. So, but the word on the street was, oh my God, don't use Tylenol. Tylenol will kill you. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it was a horrible, horrible thing.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Well, they clearly recovered very, very
Um,
nicely. So
yeah.
I don't feel that bad for them
No,
in the long run.
only in that it wasn't their fault. That's the only way I
Yeah,
put that for them.
sure. Yeah, no, very good point. Well, on that note, that is all that we have for you this week.
No, can't we do another one?
Well, okay, let's do part 2 then.
Yes.
Now, right? I want to do a whole episode on Roger because I think that's like so fascinating, that whole situation, because we really did like a whole abridged thing on it, but different episode. But Mom, thank you so much for coming on. It was fantastic to have you on.
Liam, thank you so much for having me. You know, I miss you so, so much. So spending this time, even though it was via, I guess your podcast people don't know this, but via Zoom, because we're looking at each other, and I miss you and I love you, and I hope we don't have to wait another 50 episodes before I get back on.
Yeah, right. Well, this episode is coming out right after the new year, and so we'll have spent lots of time together over the holidays, so that won't last for much longer. But again, thank you so much for coming on, Mom, and thank you all so much for listening. We are going to put all of our sources on our website so you can read everything for yourself and probably come up with a few theories for yourself too. And if you were just loving this podcast and you're just wondering how you can tell anyone and everyone about it, the best way to help others discover this podcast is by leaving us a 5-star rating and a review wherever you are listening right now. So make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're wondering what we have in store for you next week, here's a quick sneak peek. Hello, everybody. It's Liam.
And I'm Grayson Gordon. Next week, I'm joining the Crime Vineyard to help Liam tell you all about a missing woman and a missing car from Connecticut that has left a family brokenhearted for close to 40 years. What really happened to Mary Badaracco?
You may need 2 bottles for this one, folks, but we'll tell you all about that next Wine Wednesday on the next episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.